Nancy Pelosi argued for a floor vote on single-payer Medicare for all in 1994.
Reasons of security, reasons of savings that spring also from the simplicity of the program, savings which spring from early intervention, people seeking and receiving health care earlier in the game so that they don't have more costly health care and hospital stays. Everything points to Mr. McDermott's bill. It is interesting to see how under scrutiny, when people really take the look at these bills, how brilliantly the single-payer plan stands out. And I think it's a tribute to Mr. McDermott's endurance that he has kept this issue alive. Others did not think it was so, shall we say, inevitable. In any event, I hope that the committee, I join my colleagues in requesting from the committee the opportunity for this bill to be considered as a substitute under the rule. It has support in my community. It has support across the country. It has support in this Congress. I hope it does on this committee as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
That's Nancy Pelosi singing the praises of single-payer Medicare for all in 1994. And asking for a floor vote on single-payer Medicare for all. She wants it to come out of committee. Isn't that something? Here's the thing that I think most people probably don't understand this, but when people show up to Washington, get elected, and they're officially politicians, I really do think they mean well. And I don't just mean Democrats. I mean Republicans too. Like Republicans, there are plenty of people out there who really believe that, abortion is murder and we have to stop it. There's plenty of people on the right who believe that, I don't know, you fill in the blank. Tax cuts are always wonderful in every circumstance. And so they get there and they really care about these things. They have an ideology. They have a philosophy. Now, in the case of the Democrats, yes, most of the Democrats get involved and they want to help their communities. They want a more effective, efficient government that provides basic needs for people. I think that when Nancy Pelosi first got to Washington, D.C., she's no different. I think she really believed in single-payer Medicare for all. I do. But I think what happens is fascinating from a sociological perspective, because when you're in that environment for so long and you're told over and over and over, that's pie in the sky, that's unrealistic, that'll never happen, you're so naive, you don't even know how these things work, eventually it wears you down. And then eventually you partake in the system to keep your own power and keep your own seat, namely campaign finance. You take money in order to get reelected, and a lot of people don't question where that money comes from, but when you look at where it comes from, it's Wall Street, it's Big Pharma, it's the military-industrial complex, it's the for-profit health insurance companies. And so eventually your good intentions are worn down and you're convinced that you're like this naive, idealist who's just stupid and doesn't get how things work. So your idealism becomes pessimism, because Hillary Clinton was once for single payer too. And then after your idealism becomes pessimism, you think, well, still I would rather be in this position and I would rather have power because at least bad things won't happen under me. And so then you start taking the Wall Street money and the military-industrial complex money and the for-profit health insurance company money. And Nancy Pelosi now is the most lucrative fundraiser among the Democrats, but she's not raising through small dollar donations. She's raising through moneyed interests. So the good intentions became not good intentions because you got so pessimistic that you thought no real big change is possible. So maybe I'll just do my tweaks around the edges. And then you submit to the way the system works, which is the financing of campaigns is incredibly corrupt. It's basically open corruption. It's a legalized bribery. And so now you're corrupt and you're not idealistic at all. And you're a status quo manager. But I swear to you guys, I think they would argue up and down and they would mean it. No. I'm not corrupt. And I'm just pragmatic now. Okay, yeah, I'm not idealistic, granted. I'm not for single-payer Medicare for all, but I'm pragmatic instead of idealistic, so I'll give you the best change we could possibly get, like Obamacare, for example. The tweaks around the edges, that's what I'll do. I'll be a status quo manager, but an effective and a sympathetic status quo manager. So they rationalize it. And unfortunately, this happens with so many people when they get to Washington, D.C. The examples like Bernie Sanders are so rare, where Bernie ideologically never wavered. He's still in favor of 99% the correct policies today. Bernie's problem is something different. Bernie's problem is he's clueless on strategy and he doesn't know how to play hardball at all. That's Bernie's problem. And that's a real problem, but it's not the same thing as selling out. He never sold out. But see, and maybe I underestimated this too originally, but with Justice Democrats, we were looking for people with the right ideology. You got to be for getting money out of politics. You got to be for ending the wars. You got to be for Medicare for all. And we found people with the right policy ideas. But I underestimated, and I think everybody else underestimated, just how much of a leader you have to be in order to really fight these powerful forces that get to work on you from day one. Where they make somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who was for single payer, eventually turn against single payer and become incredibly corrupt. Now, thankfully, none of the Justice Democrats are corrupt. They're not taking corporate PAC money. They're not taking financial institution money. They're not. They're taking money through small dollar donations. So none of them are corrupt. And don't ever make that mistake, because if you malign their intentions, they'll shut off and never listen to you because you're wrong when you call them corrupt. They're not corrupt. But their problem, again, is strategy. Their problem is they're in favor of the right policies, but that comes to naught if you don't know how to fight and you don't know how to be a leader and you don't know how to reject the nefarious forces that get to work on you from day one. Where, I think they really believe, no, force the vote is not a good idea, because we need to still work more to get more of us in here to then eventually get to the point where we could have the vote on Medicare for all. I think that they really think that they're being strategically intelligent by negotiating behind closed doors instead of applying public pressure to Democratic leadership. I think they think this is the right strategy. And it's not. It's just not. So what you see here is a worst case scenario with Nancy Pelosi in terms of just how much Washington can beat you down. And will it get to the point where some of the Justice Democrats eventually do become fully like Nancy Pelosi? It's possible, but they're certainly not there now. And if you think they're there now, you're wrong, because they don't take any big money, and they're still for all the right policies. They just don't know how to be leaders, and they don't know how to take control of the situation and control the narrative. And that's a shame, but this is a cautionary tale, man. Nancy Pelosi was absolutely for single-payer Medicare for all. And then slowly but surely over time, Washington wore her down, and then she completely submitted and became incredibly corrupt and started raising big money. And now we are where we are, where she's just sort of like the embodiment of the corrupt status quo, which is terrible all around. But we need people who are idealistic, correct on the policies, and are willing to be leaders, and are willing to reject all those nefarious forces that get to work on you from day one, because they're powerful. And before you know it, slowly but surely, you're losing that edge you had when you were a real outsider. We need people to maintain their outsider status while being insiders, in the sense that they're there in Washington, D.C. making policy. Maintain that outsider worldview. Maintain that fighting spirit, that leadership spirit, because it does require a very unique, special person to not become what they despise. And that's exactly what happened with Nancy Pelosi. She became what she despised. She was idealistic. She was for single payer. Slowly but surely, she was convinced that's unrealistic. You're silly if you're for that. Okay, fine. I'm for a more mild reform. Now I'm just being pragmatic. Oh, and I want to win, so now I'm going to raise all the big money. Next thing you know, you're doing the bidding of the corporations. You don't even realize how you got there. That's what happened with Nancy.